that we why do you have to be so loud, Zoom? So we are super excited to be here tonight. It's December, it's crazy, and I know that you guys have a ton of things to do. We have, in the company, we have a huge sale every day. Today is day 7 of 12. So it's like, oh, we want to do all the things. So I really value the fact that you guys made the decision to be on this call today. And we're going to definitely pass on the recording to everybody. We have a great, amazing guest. This is actually the second time that we have her on a team call. The first time was about a couple of years ago when she was launching her first book. And we also had her as a keynote speaker at one of our company events. So Kindra, I know, is a fan of Zaya. She's a fan of women entrepreneurs and helping entrepreneurs and business people and all of this. I know her passion. I've followed her for a while. I'm super happy that she's here, and I know you guys are too. And for those of you that are not familiar with Kindra, make sure you follow her on social media platforms. But we are about, well, I have it, and you guys sure need to get your hands on this book, and she's going to tell us more about the book. But she is already a best-selling author. The book that I had previously, which I know many of you guys are familiar with, Stories That Stick, bestseller, and now this one is also going to be a bestseller. I'm already starting to read it. I got a secret copy of it. It's called an advanced copy. So this book is not out yet, but we are part of this launch tour with this amazing mom of 2. She's married. Their family lives in New York City. I love following their adventures in the city, even though I am not envious of the cold in New York City, but love the adventures and love following you. We are super excited that you're here, Kindra, and we are super excited to learn more about your book, and most importantly, super passionate about the topic of the book, because stories are not just the stories that we tell. You know, in our business we tell a lot of stories, but there are also stories that are so important that we are aware of, that we know what are the stories we're telling ourselves, because those are the ones that can make us or break us. I used to tell myself really, really negative stories that made me play small. And I'm excited to learn more about you and how we can tackle these stories, how we can change them. So Kindra, please join us. I don't see you on this.
I'm here.
Oh, hi.
Hi, everyone. I love seeing all your faces and the hi. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for supporting me, Paula, and now and always. It's such an honor to be here with your incredible, thriving team. And thank you so much for being a part of this virtual tour.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so as you heard Paula say, I love all of you. I actually just wore what is it, the rock star? I still have my rock star bra. Is that what it's called? The rock
All-star.
The all-star. I feel like a rock star when I wear my all-star. The rock star. I just wore it this morning. But as Paula said, I love Zaya, and I understand what it is that you're doing here as female entrepreneurs. I understand how exciting it is. I understand how challenging it can be. And if I'm totally honest, I would tell you that I wrote this book for myself. Because I need the reminder about the stories that I tell myself. But if I'm totally honest, I wrote this book for you, and it wasn't the book I was expecting to write. So as you heard Paula say, my first book was Stories That Stick, and it was all about the stories that we tell outwardly in business, which, make no mistake, is extremely important as you are in the area of social selling, right? You're posting on social media, you're engaging people in this community with these products, and the whole the whole idea of what it means to be a part of this company. And stories are the way that we connect with people and we communicate what it is and what we do when it's so much more than leggings and sports bras, right? Wouldn't you agree? And so a lot of my research and my work has been in the area of storytelling and business. But then through my own life and the various ups and downs, right? The beginning of my career, having two small children, watching them grow, moving from suburban Arizona to an apartment in New York City, surviving a pandemic in New York City, like all of these. And I started to realize that, while yes, outward stories are extremely important, um, my career, yes. My health and well-being, yes. My overall satisfaction with life and that sense of happiness, the quieting of the just like general malaise of anxiety, not the like clinical anxiety, but the kind of anxiety that just kind of like hangs out with you like a shadow. Was completely, it really had nothing to do with outside anything. It was all right in here. It was all about the stories I was telling myself. And these stories like show up in a variety of different ways. They hold us back. Paula, I love that you said it made me play small. In some ways, it would keep me stuck, or as soon as I would start, have you ever had this happen? As soon as you start dreaming bigger. How many of you have those moments where you catch a glimpse and you start dreaming bigger, right? And you're like, oh, I feel it. And then all of a sudden it's like gone. You're like, where did it, it's like trying to start a fire. Now, those of you who live in warm places, maybe you don't have a fireplace that you're always trying to start your fire. I'm now in the season of trying to start the fire in the fireplace. Okay. And you're like, I think I got it. It's just like, and it just fizzles into nothing, right? Like I felt like that's what even my ambition or my motivations in any area of my life. I mean, even my relationships with my husband, with my friends, right? Just that feeling of stuckness. And you can look to outside sources to change that, but ultimately that is completely controlled by the stories we tell ourselves. And the bad news is that it's not always easy, right? Like we got some, Paula said, we've got some stories that we're up against here. Have any of you felt that before, where you're like, if you were to ever pay attention to it, you're like, oh my gosh, whatever's going on in there, that is intense, right? The good news is you really can, with something as simple as actively choosing a different story, you can adjust and create an entirely different path, and therefore an entirely different future. I've seen it in my own life. I progressively see it happen as I come up against new negative stories. I'm like, whoa, just one today. Oh my gosh. I was sitting there, I was signing books, and we had to sign, you have to sign all this stuff. I'm getting a cramp. I have a cramp, but you know what? I will sign until my hands fall off if that's what it takes. And I was like singing along with the Broadway soundtrack, Dear Evan Hansen. I don't know. I just like to sing along with things. And I tried singing the harmony, and I like actually did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did it. And then I realized, I'm like, why am I so surprised by this? And I am holding an old story that I can't sing. Right. Like, and it'll just show up in these really random ways. And so I don't sing, and like I shy away from singing because I've told myself I can't sing. Now, keep in mind, I was in musicals all of my young life. I was in like a small opera, and I was the lead role. Like, I can sing. I used to work, don't tell anybody this. I used to work at a karaoke bar in graduate school until I would teach. Oh, I taught at, like, I was a TA for graduate school, and then my students found out that I taught at the local karaoke bar, and they all started showing up to my, and so I had to quit. I couldn't keep working at the karaoke bar because I had some particular songs I like to sing, like I'm a Slave for You, Britney Spears, like it just wasn't a good look if you're supposed to garner the respect of your students. These stories pop up, and the good news is if you actively start taking control of the stories you tell yourself, everything can change. This is the most important story of all. And you are here at the absolute perfect time because I don't know about you, but for me, December is filled with, it's like a landmine of possible stories, right? You got family coming in, you got all these things, expectations you got to live up to. You're trying to close the end of the year. You're already trying to get a head start on 2022. So you are here at the exact right time. Here's what I want to cover with you today. Just two big things. Number one, to give you a little additional insight on our stories at work, okay? What you should be looking for and really what you need to understand in terms of what you're up against. And then number two, I want to give you an overview of the 4 steps that I outline in the book because I don't want to just say, choose your story, change your life, and like not give you a way how. Okay. So I want you to be able to like read this book and be like, oh, I can change this right now. But I don't want you to wait. The book doesn't come out until January. So I want you to like at least have an idea of what these steps are so you can start making progress today. But first, let's start here. How and why and what's going on with our stories. Now, you may or may not, oh, Paula, thank you. Yeah, January 11th. Oh, I should put in the chat here. Okay, here's something I'm going to say right now. Choose your story, change your life.com. Okay, so that is a very special website. If you pre-order the book, and you can pre-order the book on that website, you'll get like a confirmation number if you order from Amazon or Barnes & Noble or like a local bookshop. You can go to bookshop.org. They'll give you your order number. Okay, so pre-order your book and then come back to this website and fill out your information with the order number. And you will get access to a whole bunch of bonuses. And who was it? Phyllis said that she's already in the, yay, hi Phyllis. Phyllis is already in the Facebook group. So one of the things that you get is access to these live trainings that I do every Monday. We'll talk about that. But at the very bottom of that choose your story, change your life form, when you fill it out, it says code. Enter this code, virtual tour. And I don't think the caps matter. That way you'll get an additional bonus that is just for you guys here on the call tonight, which is the course that I have all about outward storytelling in this business. So you can be thinking about your outward stories while you're thinking about your inward stories. Okay, so first let's talk about what we're up against when it comes to our stories. Hold on, hey Michael, would you turn off the heat, please? I love you. So he must have heard me say like that it's been cold here. And so the sweet man just turns on the heat, but it is blowing right on my face. And I'm going to look like a big cherry tomato by the end of this. I know. It's my natural glow. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the stories that you're up against. You may or may not consider yourself a great storyteller outwardly, right? That might be, how many of you, is that still a skill that you want to work on? You're like, I need to work at being a better storyteller, which a lot of people feel that way. So you are not alone. And of course, yes, there are ways to practice and do that. But here's the thing. Fine, you may need to work on your outward storytelling, but you are a master at inner storytelling. It is wired right into you. You don't even have to try, okay? This is part of being human. Part of being human is, from the beginning of humankind, was we were able to tell stories to each other to inform, to make decisions, to evolve as a species. But at the same time that was happening, we also developed the skill of the inner narrative, where we told stories to ourselves about what was acceptable, what wasn't, where we kept a catalog of our failures, of things that worked, right? And then we could tell those stories back to ourselves to keep ourselves in line. And this, over the course of, thousands and thousands of years, has become completely automatic. Our self storytelling is as automatic as the breath in our lungs and the blood through our veins. Okay, you don't have to think to breathe. You don't have to think to have blood go to your fingertips. Your body does that for you. Same with our stories. But just out of curiosity, how many of you watch your heart rate either when you work out or maybe when you sleep? Do any of you pay attention sometimes to your heart rate, right? And if you haven't, you at least know that you can. Like, measuring your heart rate is now kind of a new thing, because we know if you measure your heart rate and are keeping track of your heart rate, you can optimize that function. How many of you have heard about I know, heart rate all the time? I had a ring, one of those rings that measured, and I left my charger somewhere, so I haven't had it. And I'm like, I wake up every day and I'm like, well, I don't know what my heart was doing while I was sleeping, because my ring is dead. The battery died. My ring was never alive. I think it thinks it's alive, but it's not. It is just on a charge. How many of you have ever heard about the power of breath work? Concentrated breathing, programmed breathing, and whether or not you've thought to yourself, I should do that, and then you actually do it, or you've thought to yourself, oh, I should do that, and then you don't. I fall into the second category. Or even when your watch pings you and is like, breathe. And I'm like, come on, give me a break. Aren't I breathing right now? Right? They can be very insistent and a little bit annoying, but we know if you start paying attention to your breath, you can optimize it. And if you don't get anything else from the book, from our time together, this awareness of your self stories can in and of itself start you on a path to change, right? Because you're not thinking about your breath, you're not thinking about your blood, you're not thinking about your stories. But once you do, the awareness gives you the opportunity to optimize. Now, here's the other thing. Another thing that's really important that you know, which I think inherently you already know, but that is that we have programmed into us, once again, a negativity bias. Okay? Our brains love to hear and keep track of and catalog the bad stories. Now, again, there is a reason for that. The bad stories in our ancient brains kept us safe. It was much better for us to hear a rustle in the bush and assume it was a lion about to eat us versus a summer breeze. Because fine, if it's a summer breeze, no harm, no foul. But if you think it's a summer breeze and it's actually a lion, you're going to die. Okay? Now, our brains don't see the difference between a lion in the bush and the modern threat of everyday life. And not only that, but our ancient brains also programmed us to pay really close attention to what is acceptable within the tribe. Okay? Because if you started taking a different path, if you started reaching beyond what other people in the tribe had deemed appropriate, have any of you felt this way? Have you felt that have you been nervous about the comments of the tribe? Okay, this is only natural. And back in our origination, yeah, if you stepped outside, they would leave you behind and you would die. Now it keeps saying, and you would die, which I know sounds very dramatic, but our brains are very dramatic and we love the negative drama. We love keeping track of that. How many of you have the iPhone, and do you accidentally swipe the wrong way sometimes and it brings up Apple News? Have any of you I just had that happen to me today, and the list of headlines that I had to choose from were absolutely terrifying. I looked at my phone and I'm like, the first word I saw was beheading. that word was on my screen. And you know what? My logical brain was like, you do not want to read this right now. Like, this is not, but my finger was like, touch the article, because it didn't, and I did, and then I closed, and then I got distracted. I had to feed somebody dinner. But I mean, it was, our brains want the negativity. And you see this even in your own social media, right? How many of you have ever posted something, a story or a post or whatever, and you get lots of positive comments, and then someone says something that's like, meh. Have any of you had the like meh, the meh? And what is the comment you remember? The meh comment. You remember the rude comment. Like, why? It's so disgusting, actually, if you think about it, that this is what we hold on to. But again, that rude comment is keeping us in place, is keeping us playing small, because it's keeping us safe. So negativity bias, the last thing that is really important is we have, quite honestly, I think we have it all wrong when it comes to making changes in our lives. Because we often think that, like an event occurs, we respond to that event, and then we get our results. And then this perpetuates over time and creates a lifetime of whatever. So the event could be the alarm goes off in the morning, and you respond by either hitting snooze and then sleeping through your morning workout, or you respond by getting up and doing your workout, and then you have the results that compound over a time. Or it's time to make some calls and do some outreach to tell people about the 12-day sale. And you know it's time to do it. Today's the day. You respond by clearing off your desk and checking all your email and plucking your eye. That's why my eyebrows are so skinny, because I just plucked the heck out of them all the way through college, because that's how I was responding. I wasn't doing the thing, which then, leads to results over time. Your business isn't going to grow if you're not doing that outreach, if you're not doing the follow-ups, right? So we think it's a pretty straightforward experience, but that's not entirely true. And this ties into the invisible nature of our stories, because there is this imperceptible slice of time between the event and the behavior, the action that we take, where our stories live. And so the event occurs, and in the blink of an eye, it doesn't even take that long. In the beat of our, the flap of a hummingbird wing, I don't know, a very small period of time, all of our stories flash before our eyes, and they determine the action we take next. And as long as we are not in control, as long as we aren't actively, intentionally choosing what stories are being played to us in that imperceptible slice of time, we're not going to change our behaviors, or at least not be able to sustain the changed behaviors, and we won't see long-term results. I think that's one of the big problems with any methodology, is we always try to change the behavior versus taking a look at the stories that come before that behavior. So for example, I want to take you back to December 2020, where I even know saying the words 2020 is kind of like a 4-letter word, even though it's a 4-number word. So it's fine. I had fallen off my exercise health well-being game, you could say. It had gotten, March 2020, it got pretty bad. I picked back up again in the summer. But then come the fall, things got a little messy. My kids were supposed to go back to school, but then they didn't. I mean, you all know. And then December was just kind of and I remember it was one Sunday afternoon in December, and I was like, I'm going to work out. And I put on my clothes, probably put on my all-star sports bra and my leggings. And I was gonna go out. I have a spin bike out on my deck. So I was gonna go ride my spin bike. But I started telling myself the stories of why does it even matter? It's not like I even see people in real life. I started telling myself like I should probably be taking care of the kids. I started telling myself that like I'm not even with my friends. I usually go to a Soul Cycle class, but Soul Cycle's closed. Like, what's the point? I started telling myself all these stories that over, it went on for the course of an hour and was getting me no closer to exercising, which was ultimately going to get me closer to my goals. Have any of you had this experience before? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. And then my husband had the audacity to put on his tennis shoes and running clothes and just go outside and go for a run. Did he contemplate whether or not people had been fed? Did he look around the house and notice how messy it was? Did he think about all the other things that he should probably be doing? No, he was like, I need to exercise. And so he went. Then I had a whole new set of stories to tell myself to keep me from going and working out. And at that moment, I was deep in the development and the research for this book. And I remember stopping and going, I think I have a storytelling problem here. Like, what if I were to choose a better story right now? And so I told myself this story of this wedding I went to a couple of years ago. And it was a time when I was keeping the promises to myself. I was eating well. I was drinking a lot of water, which does matter. I was working out and I felt amazing from the inside out. And we went to this wedding. I remember exactly the shoes. I remember the dress. I remember dancing the night away. I remember all of it. And I remember this woman coming up to me actually and saying, you are just the most radiant woman here, which is kind of mean considering there was a bride there, but nevertheless, and it really wasn't, I didn't tell the bride, it really wasn't about that. It was that I felt so good. And then I told myself this story of another night when we'd gone out dancing all night for a big charity benefit. And I had this awesome dress and I felt so good. And then I told myself the story that actually came from those grad school days when I was dating a boy named Pool Boy. He had a real name, but I never called him that. I only called him Pool Boy. And I was just in like great shape and I was taking really good care of myself. And I remember Pool Boy just looking at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. And all it took was telling myself those 3 stories. And suddenly I wanted to work out. And I told the kids, I'm like, hey, I'm heading out. You get to play your video games. And unless someone is bleeding or choking. And then I was like, actually, don't eat anything. Like, don't go near the kitchen. I'm going out on the deck. I'm going to ride my bike for like 30 minutes. Unless you're bleeding, don't come out there. It was the stories that changed my behavior that over the course of any period of time would change the trajectory of those goals and what I was looking to achieve. Okay. So now what I want to do with the last bit of time that we have is briefly give you a quick overview of the 4 steps that are a part of the method. And know that in the book, I go much deeper on this. Also in the book, there are the whole last part of the book is about the 5 key areas where these stories show up in our lives. Like how many of you have stories around your business or your career or what you're building here, right? And what you're capable of. Yeah, that's why it's so good that you're here right now. Health and wellness is another place where our stories take up a lot of space. Money stories. I mean, money is a story. But if you have ever thought that maybe your stories around money are holding you back, we talk about that. Love and relationships. I mean, there's an epic story in there of a woman who I'm not even going to tell you what happened. It was so good. And then family and parenting. Do I have any parents on the phone here? And the levels at which storytelling matters there are deep and wide and profound and terrifying in some ways. But luckily, you have everything you need to be able to tackle those. So I want to give you the 4-step method. I'll review it and then we'll talk a little bit about each. So the first step is to catch your stories. So that's step 1. Step 2 is to analyze your stories. Step number 3, this is the key step, which is to choose a better story. And step number 4 is to install your chosen stories. Okay, so let's start at step number 1, which is to catch your stories, the stories that are already there and maybe holding you back, to catch them in the act. So let me ask you, one of the surefire ways to catch a story, to be like, oh, wait, there's probably a story there, is statements, like limiting belief statements. Do any of you have any limiting beliefs? And in fact, actually, what I'd like you to do, for those of you who are brave enough, is to, and you should be, this is a great community of people. You are safe here. I want you to head over to the chat and think about what one limiting belief is that you have, that if you were to get that under control, things would change for you in a big way. So I want you to put that in the chat. I can't have it all. Yes, that is, you are not alone on that one, Kristen. I'm not creative enough. Interesting. Phyllis, yep. Fear of failing. I won't be able to serve people, make a difference. I feel trapped, stuck. I'm not enough. My health. My friends won't like me if I succeed. Oh my gosh, I was never good enough. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. I'm not a good enough leader. I'm not good enough. Let me tell you, we did a study, and the number one response, look at these coming in, was this sense of not being enough, smart enough, good enough, a leader. I'm not enough of a leader, whatever it is. But scroll through these right here, if you would, and look at these. And you know the women on the call right now, right? Can you believe that these are the things that we carry around with us? Like, do you see some of your friends and the thing that they carry around with them? And you're like, wait a minute, I know you to be powerful and incredible. And that this isn't based in truth at all. So I think I'm too inconsistent. One of the key ways that you can catch some of your stories in the act is like, I'm too inconsistent, is to say, okay, there's probably a story there. And what stories are propping up this belief? So for example, I was just doing a podcast interview the other day, and the guy said, my limiting belief, I was just talking about it with my sister, is that I have to be perfect in order to do it. Like, it needs to be perfect. And he's like, it keeps me from doing so many things because I know I'm not going to be perfect when I do it. And he's like, and I just realized that when I was a kid, I was really bad at going to bed. Like, I was always the kid that kept getting up. I needed water. I wanted to read a book. I wanted to, I couldn't sleep. My belly hurt, whatever. And my parents got really sick of it. And so my father, he was telling me this, my father created a chart. And every night I went to bed perfectly. I got a gold star on my sleep chart. And every week I had a perfect week of gold stars. I got to go to the store and pick out a toy. And he's like, I remember exactly where that chart was. I remember exactly what those gold stars looked like. And I was rewarded time and time again for being perfect. Like, no wonder I think that I have to be perfect. And he's like, and that was just one story. All right. So, and that actually leads us into the second step. But one other surefire way to catch your stories is anytime like a feeling comes out of nowhere. Do you ever have that where you're like, there's like this feeling either of anxiety or a feeling of, it's just this, I can't really even describe it, but you know what I'm talking about, right? And then you're like, wait, and you go on and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I had a bad feeling a minute ago. What was that feeling about? go back, and my guess is there are stories under that feeling. Okay. Another thing, how many of you are procrastinators? Whenever you find yourself procrastinating, it's a good time to stop and be like, okay, what am I? My guess is there are some stories there that are keeping me from taking the action that will move me toward my goal. All right. So step one is catch. Step two, as I mentioned, is analyze those stories. Now, I didn't mention this. When you pre-order the book and you get the bonuses, you actually get an entire course on this step alone, where I go in detail on the 6 key questions you should be asking yourself in order to fully analyze where these stories are, where they're coming from, and how they're impacting your life and your future. So that's like this gentleman, all of a sudden, this podcast host, all of a sudden realizing one of the stories from his childhood is this like perfect sleep chart. And he said, oh my gosh, there are so many more of those stories. No wonder I feel this way. No wonder I think I have to be perfect. Here's the beautiful thing about the analyze step. The analyze step is where grace happens. The analyze step is where forgiveness happens and compassion. And not necessarily for the other characters in your life. Maybe that's the case, but definitely for yourself. This moment where you can be like, oh, instead of beating yourself up that, oh, I'm so inconsistent, you can be like, oh, I understand where this inconsistency comes from. And whether or not it's even a bad thing, because maybe your inconsistency is the greatest thing about you, because an inconsistent person can be really awesome for a focused period of time, right? And if that's what it is, then you can be really awesome, right? And an important thing to bring up here, which brings us into our next, into the next step, is, you know, the title of the book. There was a moment where it was like, okay, should it be, hold on, I'm trying to get it so it doesn't glare so much. Should it be change your story, change your life, right? Because that has a nice ring to it too. But I specifically wanted it to be choose your story, because this is not about changing our past. We can't change it. It happened, right? We can't change the stories, the things that have happened to us, the things that we've done. But we can choose to focus on stories that serve us versus let that automated negativity bias hold us back. So the third step then ultimately is to choose better stories. So a couple of different ways you can do this. And I want to tell you about all of them, but I'm only going to tell you about 2 of them. And the first one is you can just straight up replace it, right? So if you are telling yourself negative stories about yourself, and you catch yourself doing it and you know where it's coming from, you can stop and just look for the opposite. So for example, something that I struggled with for a very long time was, you can call it mom guilt or parenting, whatever. Like, I just thought I was failing my children because I had this additional passion being on a call at bedtime. But well, my kids go to bed way earlier than this, but with all of you, right? Traveling the world, when traveling the world used to be the thing that we did. And on a regular basis, I was constantly telling myself that I was failing as a mother. And in some cases, it made me worse at my job. And at the very least, it siphoned away the joy that I should be feeling, either from being a mother or from the work that I was doing. Have any of you ever struggled with this? Right. And And it was so crazy because when I would go into these spirals, they were spirals, all these stories would play back to me, starting with my own mother, whose entire goal was, like, her biggest regret was that she had to go to work when I was a newborn. She wanted so badly to be home with me. And so when my brother was born, my parents had created their whole life such that she could stay home with me and reached her ultimate goal. And she was like the best mom ever. She was at every school event. I mean, the snacks, if there were Pinterest back then, she would have been all over it, right? Like, she was the holiday and birthday queen. And then so those stories were like, well, you're not like your mother, because I just told my kids this year that's the last birthday party any of them get. I took my daughter she wanted to go to a cat cafe where you just go and pet cats. Now, I am allergic to cats. So I have decided that story actually goes in the bucket of, you are an awesome mother. You took your daughter to a cat cafe and you could have died. Well, okay, I wouldn't have died, but I mean, it was right. So, but then I did tell them, I'm like, that's the last birthday party I'm doing. And then my daughter said, "Aw," because her brother's 1 year older. And she's like, he got 10 birthday parties. And I'm like, well, his 9th birthday party was over Zoom. So if you want to have a Zoom birthday party, fine by me. So anyway, I had all of these, or I had this story of the various talent shows or recitals, or little skits that they do at school that I missed, or the time that they were supposed to bring a sugar pumpkin for Halloween and I forgot until the last minute, and there wasn't a sugar pumpkin to be found in all of New York City, and my only two options were like this big 40-pound massive pumpkin, or one that was green, which I knew she wasn't going to be okay with. So I had to pawn off a sugar pumpkin from a friend that I had all the stories about being a bad mother, and it would bring me down. And then one day I had enough of it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to choose a different story. What are the stories of me being a great mom? And there was the story of the time that I did go on the field trip, and I was amazing at it. I was an excellent chaperone. Turns out the bar is pretty low. All you have to do is not look at your phone very much, and you are an excellent chaperone. But the teacher would write me then every time there was a field trip, and she would write me in advance and be like, I know you're really busy. I know you travel and you have like podcast interviews, but we have a field trip on this day, and if you could be the chaperone, I want to make sure you get in on it first. And I'm like, a teacher doesn't write you and request you as a chaperone if you're a bad mom, right? Like, that's just not how it works. Or the time I was in a cab with my son, and he's more a scientist, artsy, creative kid. He's really amazing. Not so much a sporty kid, and he was kind of having a hard time with the sporty boys at school. And I said to him, well, hey, have you ever thought about trying soccer? Maybe you wouldn't be that bad at basketball. You should give it let's. And he said, Mama, I know who I am. I'm okay with who I am. And they'll be okay with who I am eventually too. And I was like, well, kid doesn't say that if he's got a bad mom. All right. Like, that's just not how. So I started putting these stories on repeat. I chose these stories to replace the bad ones with good ones. And that constant nagging went away for a very long time. It can flare up again here and there. Things change. You can be in vulnerable situations, but I am in a much better place as far as that is concerned. So that's one option. Replace. Identify what the bad stories are, and then replace them with good stories. And the second one, there's so many that I want to tell you about, because I just want you to be able to do this. But one other one is you can research. And by research, you can look to other people who inspire you and use their stories as, if they can do this, so can I. So for example, for me, every once in a while, I get stuck in the limiting belief of like, wait, so really, I'm just going to tell people, you tell yourself too many bad stories, you should start telling yourself better ones. I wrote a whole book about that. I mean, I can say that in a sentence. I wrote a whole book. Really? That sounds too stupidly simple. Like, what were you thinking? This is insane. This is not. And anytime I go there, I think about my friend Mel Robbins. Do you know Mel Robbins? Who just launched her new book, which was amazing, called The High Five Habit. New York Times #2 bestseller, blew it out of the water. And her whole premise is you should give yourself a high five in the mirror in the morning. Pretty simple if you think about it, right? And here she has made a difference in so many people's lives. And so whenever, exactly, that was a good book. So whenever I start thinking like, oh gosh, how many of you have this limiting belief? Who do you think you are? I tell myself about Mel Robbins and I use it as inspiration because there's plenty of room for people changing people's lives. Here's the one warning that I give you with that. That gets very close to comparison. And comparison can quickly turn on you and transform into a downward spiral, right? So if the day were to ever come that I was looking to Mel Robbins as inspiration and suddenly it started making me feel worse about myself, it'd be time to put that story down and find a different one. Okay. These stories, these chosen stories, are all about how you feel when you tell them to yourself. That's what matters above how big they are, about how you think they should, what stories you should be telling yourself. I mean, maybe if I were to ever doubt myself, I would tell myself this story of stories that stick being a bestseller. I'm sorry, it just doesn't do it for me for some reason. Like that doesn't, like it's not the thing that makes me like, yes, okay, I'm going to go ride my spin bike. I'm better off telling myself stories about Pool Boy, quite honestly. Don't worry, Michael knows all about poor Pool Boy. All right, and the fourth step, I'll just briefly mention it, is to install. And ultimately what we're trying to do here is stop the automation, program in new intentional chosen stories, and then intentionally retell those to ourselves. It's going to require effort on your part at first, but to tell those chosen stories over and over and over and over again until that becomes the automation, which is what happened to me for the parenting thing. It came to the point where I didn't have to tell myself those stories day in and day out. They were just there. They were what was automatically playing, and they were my new operating system. Okay, that is what I wanted to share with you tonight. That, and make sure that you get in there, pre-order the book. Now, if you'd pre-ordered it in advance of tonight and you didn't enter in that virtual tour code, you would have received an email from my teammate Lauren. Just send her an email back and be like, hey, I was on the virtual tour tonight. Can I get that additional program? The other thing I wanted to tell you about the pre-ordering. So all the pre-ordering stuff goes away once the book comes out. But the other thing is we're going to have a virtual launch party, and we're going to mail people like little kits, and it's going to have like a drink card so you can make a cocktail or a mocktail, and it's going to come with a little fun thing so we can have a celebration. So you should be a part. I've never been so excited about a virtual party. Oh, maybe that's why my daughter wants a virtual birthday party. Maybe virtual parties really are fun. I don't know, but this one is going to be fun. But really, I hope, if nothing else, that as you go about your day, maybe every time your watch pings you to breathe or stand up, does anyone else's watches tell them to stand up all the time? That you use that as a moment to be like, what story am I telling myself right now? And is this a story that if I had my way, I would choose for myself? And if it isn't, choose a better one. All right, that's it. That's all I have. I know it's late on the East Coast. For those of you who are on the West Coast, you're probably just about to have some dinner. But Paula, thank you so much.
You're awesome. I love this. I don't know if it's okay if I can share something with you guys. One story. Long time ago, I lost a ton of weight, and I did it with through videos. So I would watch the videos and do the workouts while the kids were little, babies, newborns, and while pregnant, like all that stuff. And I saw the instructors on the videos, like some of you guys know Shalene Johnson and Shanti and all of them, right? So I would look, I'm like, oh man, I wish I could do what they do. I wish I could one day do that. But I always am like that's impossible. Like there's no way I can do that. So years, I even went to a training one time to be a turbo kick instructor. And I did the training and I'm like, yes, I'm gonna do this. And then I went home. It was like one of the highlights, like that was like the fun thing because I was a stay-at-home mom. So that was like I got out of the house, I did something for myself. It's like it was like a personal reward for having lost so much weight. And then I'm like, oh, this is actually not bad. Like I can do this, right? And then I go home and I'm like, how am I gonna do this? Like people are gonna make fun of my accent. I'm gonna forget the words. I'm not gonna be able to say that out loud. So about a year and a half went by and I would practice choreography, but the words just couldn't come out of my mouth because I was paralyzed thinking people are going, who am I to stand in front of people and try to teach them something and forget the words or say things that don't make sense, like all of that stuff. Like it was like paralyzing for sure. And then one day I just thought, I can help people that speak Spanish. I can actually coach them in English and Spanish. I'm like, oh my God, I can do this. And if they make fun of me, too bad. I speak 2 languages. So it's like those stories, like it comes back in so many ways. Like just recently, and I'm so glad that you mentioned Mel's book because it's legit. It's taking me out of a funk that I've been in for the longest time. For a few months, I was going downhill. And maybe some of you noticed like my energy has not been the same and I needed to get out of a funk, but it was changing the story again. And then you show up with the book and I'm like, okay, I feel like, yes, like something's happening. So you guys, seriously, this is so powerful. Order the book. I don't make anything on the book. I wanted to bring something and someone and a tool that I know that this is not just for the business, but for anything, like for motherhood, for being a wife or a husband or a spouse or whatever, an employee. Like this will show up, stories show up at work. Like who am I to think that I can present this to my boss or like any of that? If we're more in control of the stories that we tell ourselves, we're going to take more action. We're going to just achieve anything we want. It's so amazing. I mean, you have no idea how grateful I think my rosy cheeks can tell you how grateful I am, how excited I am. I'm passionate about this topic, and everything that you do is just so inspiring. And same with you guys. Like I took notes of all these things that you guys are saying about limiting beliefs. That number one, I hope you notice that you're not the only one. There's multiple people. Like I'm not a good leader. A lot of you guys said that. A lot of you said, what if I fail? What if I do this? What if I do that? It's common. You're not alone. We're not alone. So I could talk about this all night, but I'm just super grateful. We'll talk more about this in the days coming and hopefully diving into the book together. So I'm super excited for you, Kindra. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for being here. Love you.
You have the best heart. You have the best heart. I'm always cheering for you, for all of you. So much love. Thank you, Paula.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Have a good night, everybody. Good luck with everything, and we'll see you at the party.
All right. Thank you, Paula. Thanks, Kindra.
Thank you.